Welcome to Green and Red, Scrappy Politics for Scrappy People, a regular podcast on radical environmental and anti-capitalist politics, brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
The silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I'm your co-host, Scott Parkin, in Berkeley, California, this Sunday morning. And as always, I'm joined by...
And I'm Bob Bazanko in Houston, and hopefully you've already had a cup of coffee and you're reading the paper, and now it's time to relax to something new. Green and Red podcast. The Green and Red media empire is branching out, and we're going to start something new. We'll do it whenever we feel like it. It's Scrappy Sunday. In the course of the podcast, as you know, we tend to do features on a particular issue. And we tend to hit some issues pretty heavily. And, more recently, we've done a lot on the environment. Scott's talked a lot about the people protesting Cop City in Atlanta. And we're really on top of our game. We've not that long in the recent past talked to Noam Chomsky, Seymour Hersh, Andy Bacevich. And so we tend to do Trevor Aronson about the infiltration of the 2020 protest. So we tend to do one issue. So, which means there's a lot of stuff that's really important that we don't talk about, unfortunately. And so what we're going to do on Scrappy Sunday is just kind of fill in the blanks, kind of like George Stephanopoulos or Chuck Todd would, although we're way better than them. So at any rate, and so we're just going to kind of talk about, some of the stuff that's been going on recently that we haven't had a chance to really do a full show about on Green and Red podcast. And it's just a chance to kind of discuss issues that are of real importance to the left, but that we haven't talked about yet, because everybody needs to know what we're thinking, right? Everybody needs our hot takes on Scrappy Sunday. If everybody else can do it, all the Brooklyn lefties and everybody else can do it, then we should as well. So to get started, there's been a news story that we actually did talk about in December of 2021. That's reemerged this week. There is a Supreme Court hearing with a kind of curious outcome, maybe not the outcome, but the voting patterns. And that involves the case of Steven Donziger versus Chevron. And Scott, you want to kind of tell us a little bit of background and what the most recent update on that is?
Yeah. And so this Steven Donziger, who was an attorney for indigenous communities in Ecuador, those indigenous communities had been poisoned basically by Texaco, which was later acquired by Chevron. Stephen had actually been a plaintiff's lawyer in multiple courts, multiple jurisdictions, both in the U.S. and Ecuador and other places. But Stephen had actually won a civil award in an Ecuadorian court of $9.5 billion in damages. Which led to Chevron withdrawing its assets from Ecuador and launch a legal action against Donziger in the U.S. In 2011, Chevron filed a RICO anti-corruption suit against Donziger and other entities, including environmental nonprofits in the U.S., including Ecuadorian communities, indigenous communities in Ecuador. The case was heard by U.S. District Court Lewis Kaplan, and who determined that the ruling in the Ecuadorian court could not be enforced in the U.S. Because it was procured by fraud, bribery, and racketeering activities. This led to Donziger being disbarred from practicing law in New York in 2018. This led to Donziger being placed under house arrest in August 2019 while awaiting trial on criminal charges of criminal contempt of court. He actually ended up doing 45 days in prison in Danbury Federal Prison in Connecticut, and he had also been under house arrest for a long time. This week he also has continued to fight, even when he's been released from prison, etc. And he has continued to fight. Something like 68 Nobel laureates have supported him, 10 members of Congress, wide swaths of the legal community in the U.S., both on the left and the right lawyers, because there's a lot of interest in how lawyers are being prosecuted for contempt of court when they've basically brought about civil litigation against major corporations. The real twist here is that it was a private prosecution by Chevron against Donziger, which the federal courts allowed to happen. And so he actually took that all the way to the Supreme Court. And this week, he had a petition of certiorari, where he was trying to get an appeal heard in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court turned him down. The interesting twist here is that there were two justices that dissented and said that we should hear Donziger's case, which were Justice Neil Gorsuch and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. None of the three liberals sitting on the Supreme Court, Justices Sotomayor, Justice Jackson, and Justice Kagan, all refused to hear it. And so that's kind of where it's at now. He's now actually doing a lot of media. We're actually hoping to get him on the Green and Red podcast sometime soon in the future. But it's like just really, it's a interesting dynamic, particularly on this show where we're really critical of liberals. It seems like the liberals, both in the Justice Department and on the Supreme Court, are not supporting people who are being prosecuted by, oil companies. He also has made a point about how he has asked Merrick Garland's Department of Justice to ask them to write a brief in support of him before the Supreme Court, and Merrick Garland's Department of Justice wrote a brief of support with Chevron in this case. And so it's a hot take that we see that the sort of liberal the liberal political sector is like very much in support of Chevron and oil companies, while we see like two justices who are like seen as conservative Trump appointees, one of which came under a lot of controversy when he was put on the Supreme Court, actually supported Donziger, at least here in Donziger's case. There's no way to know how they would have actually voted if they'd actually been able to hear the appeal, but still, it's an interesting dynamic that's going on.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that I know you and I have talked about over the years, Democrats and liberals have relied heavily on the courts from Roe v. Wade onward, and really kind of never did any kind of political organizing, and so essentially we've lived in a sense under minority rule. I mean, the Republican Party has won only one popular vote. Yeah, since 1992, the Republican candidate for president has only won more votes one time, Bush in 2004. Democrats, and yet we have the Republican Party just steamrolling American politics, and this is a good example of that reliance on justices and courts and all these kind of legal niceties rather than actual resistance and mobilization. And so this is kind of, in a sense, this is a product of that. The chicken's coming home to roost, and we'll put it in the show notes. The show we did with one of Donziger's representatives about a little over a year ago.
More of a friend than a representative.
Oh, okay, yeah. But it's truly outrageous, when you think about the oil companies essentially manipulating, really just kind of controlling this legal process, and the Attorney General Merrick Gelding doing like virtually nothing about it. So that's a new name for him. Anyway, yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do another full show on this because it's important stuff. And remember, you can't rely on the courts or judges. They're part, that's the thing. Like, I think people are coming around and understanding what police do, right? But I don't know if they understand, like, the court system is just the same thing, right? That's the next step along the way. So as bad as cops are, I mean, judges and DAs and prosecutors, they're all doing the same stuff, right?
And I just want to point out that one of the sky is falling moments for liberals during the Trump years is how Trump had appointed 20 to 25%, Trump and McConnell had basically engineered 20 to 25% of sitting judges to be, appointed by Trump. And now we're seeing Biden has a 51-49 Senate. He's now going full throttle on appointing judges throughout the federal court system. But if he's putting Lewis Kaplan was a Clinton appointee. And, he's basically been doing the bidding of Chevron through this entire process. And so, what is the benefit of having like a liberal Democrat, the most climate friendly president, in the White House, if he's appointing these these pro corporate judges and even justices, to the federal bench.
Yeah, when the GOP has a court opening, they just go to the Federalist Society, which is a really far right-wing ideological group, and get names. This is how they came up with Barrett and Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and all these people. The Democrats instead kind of look for identities, right? Biden. I'm gonna put a black woman on the bench. There's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of qualified black women. The point is, rather than go to, let's say, the National Lawyers Guild, which the ACLU is basically a liberal institution. National Lawyers goes a little further out there, but not at all like, what the Federalist Society would be. The Democrats don't do that. They look for people like Mary Gelding or the governor of New York was trying to appoint somebody to the state's court of New York who's like anti-union, anti-choice, right? And even the New York Democrats said enough there, and that's not exactly a stellar crew with a lot of spine. So you can't compare, even if Biden does, and he has had a lot of confirmations now of judges, but not Supreme Court, obviously, just one, but it's still a pretty bleak, and it just kind of shows how the Republican Party and the conservatives go further and further to the right, and the liberals just follow them to the point where they're now kind of like center right, and you have like Sanders and the squad who are little better than Gephardt Democrats constituting the radical left. And yet, the media the other day had to think about AR-15s and how they're the weapon of choice among extremists on both the left and right. Like how many left extremists, own AR-15s? I mean, there are a few, but come on, it's like, it's just insanity. But that's a good segue. We're talking a little bit about justice and things, because the next, something I want to talk about that I've been thinking about a while is justice and race. And obviously that's a huge issue, and we haven't done a lot on it, but it's a huge issue. And a lot of it now, I think, is just kind of accepted wisdom among people, liberals and people on the left. But I think sometimes when we talk about policing and race, it gets a little too reductionist. I don't know if that's the word I want to use, but it's not as nuanced as it could be. And I want to start with just a few examples, and then kind of try to make my point, because I think, in a sense, I think policing is actually way worse, and police are much more dangerous than most of us even think about. A few weeks ago in Henrico County Jail in Virginia, there was an inmate having a mental health crisis named Ervo Otieno. And there's video of him. He was put in a cell, and at 2:30, there's video of police going into the cell and beating him up. And then he's amid a mental health crisis. And then they brought him to the mental hospital. And at 4:40, barely 2 hours later, there's video of 7 police and 3 hospital staff pummeling him and pounding him on top of him. The guy had on leg irons and handcuffs, and they asphyxiated him to death. So you have an African-American guy who was being killed by the cops amid a mental health crisis while he's handcuffed and in shackles. And then another story that happened, I think, a little over a month ago, which many of you may have heard about in the video of this. A guy named Anthony Lowe, who was a double amputee in Huntington Park, California, who also has a history of mental illness, was waving a knife, and apparently I think he had stabbed somebody. So the police were called out. And this guy, who's a double amputee, wielding a knife, hopped out of his wheelchair and began to run on his stumps, almost like a gymnast would. And the police shot him dead, right? Stories like that, they're all over the place. If you follow social media, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you'll see, multiple stories every day of some kind of outrage like that. Today, there was one about a guy who was stopped for a traffic stop in, I think, Georgia, near Atlanta, maybe. And the police said he looked like somebody who had stolen a credit card and bought purses in Louisiana. The guy's never been in Louisiana his whole life, but because the police thought he resembled him, the guy spent a week in jail, and his family spent thousands of dollars in legal fees, and finally got the guy out. He missed work and all that kind of stuff. We know that kind of stuff. So what I want to do is kind of take it a little different direction, though, and mention 3 other people, because the pattern that we have, and we always say, like, we talk about policing and race, policing and Black people, and absolutely true, undeniable, right? Blacks are like 12% of the American population, and what, 40%, I think, of victims of police violence, and 40% of the people killed by police, right? But let me give you 3 other cases. There's a guy named Brandon Miller, a young man named Brandon Miller. He's like a great basketball player at the University of Alabama, which was ranked first going into the tournament, got beat. And Brandon Miller will be one of the first people drafted in the NBA draft, and he's going to make a lot of money, a lot of millions. His money will fold, not jingle, as they say. A teammate of his on the Alabama basketball team texted him. He was out one night and texted him to bring his gun to him. And so Brandon Miller delivered this guy his gun. The guy used the gun to kill a young woman, 23-year-old woman who's a mother, right? Nothing's happened to Brandon Miller, nothing at all, right? He played, and in fact, at the next game during the introductions, one of his teammates pretended to pat him down. It's really, vile display, right? Nothing happened to him. The coach defended him. The coach asked for sympathy. Look what he's going through, all that kind of crap, right? And so, this is kind of how, so nothing came of this, right? Jalen Carter was a football player at the University of Georgia, great football player. He too is going to get drafted soon in the NFL and will make many millions of dollars. Georgia won the national championship this year, and they had a big celebration for it. And afterward, that night, he was out in his car racing against a car which had a Georgia staff member and one of his teammates in it. They lost control and both were killed. Jalen Carter had 3 prior speeding tickets. One was going more than twice over the speeding limit. At one point, he was stopped by an Athens policeman who said, "Look, I don't know if y'all have to send out a text or something to the other teammates, but slow down." Jalen Carter got probation for racing and reckless driving. He also left the scene, which means he by the time the police got to him, he couldn't be tested for alcohol, right? And he lied initially about it, and he's on probation, and he's about to get a huge payday also. And then the last one's probably a little better known. He's a National Basketball Association superstar, really. Ja Morant plays for the Memphis Grizzlies. Recently, Memphis had a game against the Denver Nuggets, and afterward, on his Instagram, Ja Morant posted photos of himself wielding a gun around, right? Which I doubt is against the law in Colorado, but it is a violation of NBA rules, right? And then it came out. I started reading a little bit more about Ja Morant last summer in his big house, kind of mansion, I guess, and I think near Memphis. He was playing basketball with some friends, and a local high school basketball star, 17-year-old kid. If you ever played one-on-one, sometimes you'll throw the ball really hard at the guy. The guy threw the ball, Ja Morant threw the ball at the 17-year-old kid really hard. Kid threw it back at Ja Morant. He wasn't expecting to hit him in the face. So Ja Morant and his friend put the kid down on the ground and pummeled him. They hit him in the head 11 times, right? And then it came out, in addition to that, recently in a game against the Indiana Pacers, there was some kind of, I think they were getting chippy with each other during the game. And afterward, some of the Indiana Pacers said they saw lasers on their bodies like you would see from a gun from Ja Morant's friends, right? And again, Ja Morant was suspended for like 8 days, but he's playing again, and there's no charges are being filed against him. And I think the reason I'm talking about this is because you have 3 young Black men, right? Brandon Miller, Jalen Carter, and Ja Morant, who, if they did not possess these elite athletic skills, would all be in deep trouble right now. They'd be in deep legal trouble. They would probably all would have been arrested. Who knows? They may still be in jail. Brandon Miller's case, when he, a lot of people say, we didn't do anything wrong. He simply gave the guy a gun. Some years ago in Texas, I read there was a guy on death row. He had been in a car with friends who went to a convenience store. He just was with them. He didn't even know what they were doing. They went to the convenience store to rob it, and they killed the clerk. The guy who's sitting in their car, the friend, also was on death row, right? Which, I mean, Brandon Miller did more than that. Brandon Miller delivered a handgun to a guy, right? And I think that the point here is that policing is absolutely racist, and the cases of Odiano and Anthony Lowe and a zillion, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and those are evident every day. But it's more nuanced than that, because if you have some kind of elite connection, or if you provide a service to the ruling class, in this particular case, it's entertainment, right? You play basketball. The Alabama alumni love, what Brandon Miller did on the court. The same Alabama alumni who probably would never allow, an African-American in their home or anything like that, but they love what he did on the court. Georgia, Jalen Carter, same thing, and John Morant really benefited from that, right? So their race was not determinative in the way that the justice system addressed them, because they had elite skills and they all could afford lawyers and all that kind of stuff. And I guess the point I'm just trying to make is that when we deal with issues of policing, it's much bigger. It's actually much worse than race. I mean, we've talked about it, on the show many times. I mean, public police forces were created during the industrial period of industrialization to protect factories and mansions of people who were, kind of creating the industrial revolution. Police from the period right after the Civil War until the early 1930s, most police violence was directed against working people, against the Wobblies, against people going on strike, against the coal miners and Blair Mountain and other groups. There's no doubt, especially in the last 20 or 30 years, it's clearly taken on an overwhelming racial, identity, right? And we see that all the time. You saw in the 60s with the blowups in Detroit and Newark and Watts and the Rodney King crisis, and obviously in the summer of 2020. But it's bigger than that, and I think that's something we have to understand. When Democrats love to praise the police, they love it. Oh, we're not going to defund. We're going to give them even more money. And not only is this like just bad, because of the role that police play socially in protecting class rule, but it's just dumb politically, because essentially the police, as are riddled with white nationalists, right, who would never support the Democratic Party. So you're giving more money to a violent group. That's the one violent group in America that scares me, is police forces, right? I mean, where was it in San Jose? The head of the police union was just arrested for trafficking fentanyl, right? You think that's the only cop in America who's selling drugs? Come on. There are theories about the summer of 2020, that the uprising was so bad that a lot of police were able to use that to really ramp up, in fact, their drug distribution networks. And that's not a conspiracy. You just read any kind of crime book or watch any kind of Godfather movie, kind of thing, and that's a
or
standard,
Wire,
right?
The Wire, yeah.
The Wire, yeah. I mean, so I think this idea that defunding is a bad word and you have to be good to the cops, and you're seeing how that plays out right now, like the Chicago mayoral election too, right, where the Democrats have nominated this one guy who's running on crime, and the police union has given him a ton of money. And Paul Vallis, who's like Eric Adams in New York, and this is kind of who the what was near a tandem's group, the Democratic Clowns, what put that's the tandem, what is that called, the
Center for American Progress.
Center for American Progress, yeah, that's their kind of thing, and Biden's all over that too. Biden loves the police, and so
I do want to say also, we also had an episode, maybe we should link it in the show notes too, with Alex Fattal, who writes a lot about policing, and Alex Fattal's point is what's been happening with policing probably for the last, I think, 50 years, probably since the 60s, since a lot of the uprisings in places like Newark and Watts and Detroit, is that and not to like be one of those lefties beating this horse, but like in a sense this more budgets for police as a part of this sort of neoliberal project where they're basically cutting budgets, so there's not services, and so people are like unable to cope with like different things going on in their lives, in their communities. And so there's like more crime, more violence, riots, things like that. And so their solution, the neoliberal solution to people responding to, budget cuts and austerity and things like that, is more money for the cops and more, more authorization to license to kill. And so license to kill and maim. And that's, in 2023, that's that's the reality we're
living. And this kind of gets to the point about how, the Republicans saying through minority rule, right? In the campaign last year, Beto O'Rourke, every ad began by praising police, and Abbott's ads were saying Beto wants to defund the police, which was bullshit, or abolish the police. And Beto was saying, no, I love the police, and that's the framework. That's the dialogue, right? That's the narrative. And when you don't get away from that, I mean, in New York, police budget is something like 11 billion. Overtime is nearly $1 billion. Look, do a simple Google search on any major city police department, how much money they spend in paying victims of police brutality, which come out of the city's budget. 98.5% of it comes out of the city's budget. Cops are never personally held liable. Police unions, which are horrible institutions, are never liable. In New York, they're spending, I forget how many hundreds of millions now to put in to kind of reinforce the subway system because of subway jumpers, fare jumpers. They're going to spend more money on policing than they were losing on fare jumpers. And, if the New York subway should be free anyway, right? But
which also brings us to another thing that I think you want to talk about, which is, sharing food with the homeless in Houston.
Yep. Houston has had really ever since you were living here, right? Democratic mayors. It's a nonpartisan city, but these have been Democrats. Houston's had two African-American mayors. I think the first openly lesbian mayor. It prides itself on its diversity. But when it comes to the homeless, as well as many, Houston's really run by a group called the Greater Houston Partnership, which is an oil and gas, it's like the Chamber of Commerce run by oil and gas people. And I will say the county executive, Lena Hidalgo, the county judge, is very different. She's actually, as far as elected officials go, is probably as good as you're going to get. But when, what was her name? What was her name? The mayor, remember? Can't remember her name now. At any rate, Annalise Parker was mayor. They passed an ordinance that you weren't allowed to feed the homeless people. This was directed against food, not bombs. And
which we did work with.
We did a lot of work with them. Yeah, they were really cool coming out to our rallies. They would actually bring food to some of our events, right? To feed people, right?
I mean, for some of our stuff, they were like our main organizing comrades.
Yeah, so. No, they were great. Yeah, we had a great relationship with them at the Houston Global Awareness Collective in the good old days, right? And don't forget our 20th anniversary show where Scott and I reminisced about that on the Green and Red podcast. That was a good time. And a couple of weeks ago, Houston started to enforce this with a vengeance. So they've been ticketing people for feeding the homeless. I was talking to a friend of mine who's from the Middle East who said he was bringing food out to people because of Ramadan fasting. All this, so they're bringing food out at night. And the police found him and just rousted him away, told him to get away. And this is something else when we talk about policing and how the way police act. So for instance, there are clearly racist actions every day with police. But for these like athletes, these young Black athletes, they're let off the hook. In the same way, the way the police deal with homeless people is really terrifying too. They'll go into these, kind of homeless encampments. They'll tear their stuff down. They'll throw it away. They'll bring dumpsters in and throw away their sleeping bags and their tents and their clothing. Cities are really openly hostile. In Houston, when they put new bus stops in now, the benches all have posts on them, right? So you can't lay down on them because homeless used to sleep on the benches. And, fortunately in Houston, you can sleep outside pretty much 12 months out of the year, but in a place like Chicago or New York or Milwaukee, it's just horrific, right? And so, just to kind of think the point here is that the police, this kind of continues, a good segue, right? The police will, they'll address the question of race differently if it involves somebody who has a service or is an elitist or has some money. And they'll go after anybody, including the homeless. And so in Houston, people are getting ticketed now. They're getting cited. They're getting fined. They have court dates for giving food out to people. I mean, think about that. They're giving food out. We're living in fucked up times, man. I mean, people, drag shows, right? I mean, drag shows is like, that's a felony based on what you wear, right? It's your clothing, right? We really are in dark times, and one of the
or a performance,
right? And the one thing is like the resistance, right? Just it's so minimal. I mean, it's just so anemic, and so the Houston homeless right now, and a lot of cities are like this. There's an attack on. I don't think in the last 2 years I've read a story about Portland that wasn't about the homeless population of Portland and how everybody is sick of them, right? And liberals are fed up, and everybody's afraid of.
Same with San Francisco. You see a lot of that in San Francisco too, especially with the tech.
Was it in San Francisco or Oakland where the guy like a month ago went out and sprayed a homeless woman, just like?
Yeah, it was a couple of months. He was an art gallery owner in south of Market, and there was a homeless woman who had been having a mental health crisis. I think actually for some time, and so he sprayed her down with a power sprayer.
An art gallery owner in San Francisco. That is as stereotypical as you can get in it.
The backlash has been so intense. I will say that he has closed his gallery down.
And what are you going to do? But it's kind of a
just to be clear, I don't feel sorry for him at all.
No, there's no reason to. There's no reason to. I think you
And,
wanted
and there's,
to.
I also want to say one other thing about that is that there's this David Horowitz sort of figure that's a little bit more local to San Francisco and to California, who's actually been getting some national attention, named Michael Schellenberger, who actually wrote a book called San Francisco, which actually attacks, this mainstream Democratic leadership as progressive, but for, allowing the city to become so, rampant with homelessness and things like that. But his shtick is to go after the city for these, like, for mentally ill people and poor people and homeless people, and it's ruining the city. It's very much from like a right-wing perspective, but he's a right-wing David Horowitz kind of hack. But I just want to like do a little dig on Michael Schellenberger. So there you go.
Well, I don't know if you saw it yesterday. Boebert was talking to a councilman from Washington. Also wanted to talk about was public urination, which is really ironic considering what her husband was arrested for public exposure, right? But yeah, I mean, it's just this assault on the homeless, which is the worst I've seen maybe ever. And there have been and during the Reagan years, there was this assault on homelessness, and it's really kind of terrifying, And again,
it reminds me a lot of things I heard about during the 1930s and the Hoovervilles and the Bonus Army and things like that.
But I mean, San Francisco is interesting too, because, Pelosi's people, wasn't it Pelosi's people who got rid of Chesa Boudin? Didn't they run the campaign? They kind of maneuvered it. I mean, this idea, it's kind of funny, right? Because you talk about the coastal elite and the Republicans make hay out of going after New York and San Francisco. And yet the Democrats who run New York and San Francisco are as pro-cop as you'll get, as retrograde as you'll get. They believe in gentrification. They attack the homeless. They fund the police. They're shutting down libraries and parks. Right. I've been in your area.
And very importantly, they go after progressive politicians who come in and try to
punch left, right?
About this. They punch left, right? Mm-hmm. So Chesa Boudin was recalled last year. Pamela Price, who's the new district attorney of Alameda County, which is Oakland, is just have this high profile prosecutor quit in a very dramatic public media attention grabbing sort of way, because they didn't like, Chesa Boudin and Pamela Price and a lot of district attorneys who are getting elected around the country want to do criminal justice reform to make the jails a little less full, make the system a little more fair, and are being totally recalled, totally targeted by, right wing, and right wing can include Democrats, interests.
Yeah, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, I don't think he's been recalled, but they've been after him for.
There's been a recall. There's been a recall campaign against him.
Yeah, I don't think it succeeded, but at any rate, and it's funny because when the Republicans talk about the big cities, like they're not wrong really when they say, well, look at what's going on in these Democratic run cities. Like, you know what, you're right, but they're the same as you, right? I mean, it's a pretty bleak time. Did you have something you wanted to talk about? You mentioned, I forgot what it was. I'm sorry, I didn't write it down.
Well, the other thing, and this is related to the criminal justice system. This is related to our former president. The other big news, probably the biggest news of the week. It's the most amazing news, if you will, Bob, is that former President Trump was indicted. And I don't really want to talk about that too much because I think everybody talks about that, and I'm sick of it. But one thing I did find was pretty interesting is that, at least on Twitter, and I actually looked a little bit, and I don't actually know if this is true, but apparently there were some comparisons to Trump running for president from prison, citing Eugene Debs, president as with a jailhouse presidential run, whenever that was in 1920. Debs. I'm hoping we'll do a show soon on Debs, but Debs was this, monumental figure on the left. He was a socialist. He was an anti-war resistor. He went to prison for resisting World War I, and he ran for president from jail. He ran for president 3 or 4 times, and I believe he got like close to 1 million votes while he was in prison. But there was a lot of comparisons this week, maybe from Trump himself, although I found no evidence of that. But I just want to point out that comparing Trump and Eugene Debs is a travesty. It was a painful thing to see. I can't imagine Trump saying something along lines of "Fantastic guy, Eugene Debs. Everybody knows he was a terrific candidate, the best, the most amazing." Uh,
Maybe he thinks Debs and Frederick Douglass are still alive.
Yeah, exactly. And one of Debs' most famous quotes is, "While there is a lower class, I am in it. While there's a criminal element, I am of it. While there's a soul in prison, I am not free." I could see Trump saying, "While there is a ruling class, I am in it. While there's a criminal element, I will avoid them. And while there's a soul in prison, I don't give a shit." But I just want to say that Debs is this monumental figure on the left who actually fought for people in prison, fought for poor people. He said, "In every age, it has been the tyrant, the oppressor, and the exploiter who has wrapped himself in the cloak of patriotism or religion, or both, to deceive and overawe the people," which I actually feel like describes Trump. And so just my hot take is that, those who are doing the comparisons of jailhouse presidential elections, which is never really going to happen in 2023 or 2024, please refrain. Right. Don't besmirch Eugene Debs's reputation by any kind of comparison to Donald Trump.
You think is Trump listening to a Jailhouse Rock or I Fought the Law and the Law Won right now, or a Chain Gang?
Yeah,
It's the same cook, right?
Yeah.
It's something else. Like I'm seeing all these lefties, like, "Oh, that was a stupid idea," or like they should have arrested him for war crimes, and everybody's a criminal. It's like, you're right, but like, why let the guy off the hook? Like, I don't get this, like this equivalence, right? Like, you're right. Clinton should be in jail. Obama, all the Clintons, all of them, Biden, of course they should be. But like, if you have a chance to put Trump in jail, do it. And again, we have this panic porn, right? The liberals, they're like, the Proud Boys. I'm like, no, they can cause trouble. There's not gonna be a civil war in the streets over this. Trump is funny. He's talking about the deep state. Sounds like the liberal Kennedy, cult. It's all so screwed up, right? Just a couple short things that we've actually talked about that I want to kind of mention a little bit more. I think it's funny right now because, and we're shifting gears a bit. The mainstream press right now is in a meltdown over China. Is it because China has developed a new weapon system? Is it because China has invaded Taiwan? Is it because China has new claims on an island chain? No, it's because China has been trying to create a framework for peace talks in Ukraine. And the media, they're not even hiding it. Like essentially China has taken the initiative in trying to create peace in Ukraine, and the US is really, scrambling right now. And, I think it's hilarious that they're afraid peace will break out, which is kind of the way the ruling classes always operate. That's what Kennedy was afraid of. In 1963, Kennedy was afraid that Diem and his brother would make peace, and that's why they had the coup. They're going to get out of Vietnam, right? So you overthrow the government and let them get killed, right? But I think it's hilarious. China right now has positioned itself, really in a really sharp international place. I've done a couple interviews and I've written a little bit about this recently, and not pro-China. They have plenty of issues of their own, but the reality is, without spending all the money on the military that the U.S. has, without invading countries like the U.S. has over the last 20 some years. We just talked about the 20th anniversary of the attack on Iraq, and the United States is involved in Afghanistan and Syria, and funding Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and obviously giving Israel insane amounts of money. And China hasn't done that. And so if you look at the world outside of the world that the U.S. media presents, these Chinese initiatives really, are very successful. They're brokering a peace right now between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which the United States isn't happy about. Again, the U.S. doesn't want to see peace break out. And I think the cost of all this, and I was just on RT, and everybody's giving me a hard time about that. But my point there, and Putin is a monster, and Russia's bad, and we all know that.
You're a puppet, though. Pro-Putin puppet. Come on.
I'm Putin's bitch. Somebody told me. But the real issue there, I think that Americans have to understand is that you can't, and then people on the left, like the New Politics Trotsky, nut jobs, have to understand is you have to be anti-imperialist and in favor of class struggle at home. You can't separate them. They're part of the same process. And so that focus, and especially those gazillions that Biden is throwing around right now in Ukraine on the U.S. military budget, building new carriers, building new weapons, comes at the expense of, East Palestine, Ohio, right? Are they going to rename that East Israel, Ohio, so they finally get funding? I think that's what they need to do. But it comes at the expense of students, comes at the expense of people whose healthcare costs have just become overwhelming, people who have lost their homes or can't afford rent. All that's connected, right? We have these massive national debts, not because we're spending money on, students or people or the elderly. I mean, these guys want to cut Social Security and Medicare. It's because of these wars abroad. And these are liberal wars. I mean, in that regard, a lot of the Republicans are right.
But if you're speaking about the new politics, Trotskyites, I mean, if you support class struggle at home and empire abroad, doesn't that just make you a NATO liberal?
Yeah, that's what I've always thought, right? They are. They're NATO.
I mean, that's what seems to make sense to me. I don't care if Chomsky endorses your magazine or not.
Yeah. No, they support the Miami Cubans, and no, they're really an embarrassment. I don't like left sectarianism, but at the same time, groups like this are really toxic and they really mess you up. Like the RCP we were talking about last week in the old days, right? When you take sides with NATO and the NSC and the Department of State and Blinken, that's bad. You can't support a war in Ukraine. Doesn't mean you support Russia. I mean, these people are insane, right? You think Andy Basevich supports Russia, for Christ's sake? You think Chomsky and her support Russia? Of course not. Medea Benjamin doesn't support Russia even, So we have all this craziness coming from, and the Republicans, it's like Rand Paul, who's like really one of the most odious, disgusting, creatures that ever kind of came out of the slime, has a better take. Matt Gaetz, is advocating getting the all U.S. resources out of Syria, and they have a better take on some of this than even like the Squad. Or Bernie Sanders says, I don't want to talk about Ukraine. I support Biden on Ukraine. Wasn't bad. Anyway, send the Green and Red podcast some money. All right. I need a new coat. All right. I'm gonna go get some soup now, Scott. Wasn't bad.
It's pretty good. That might be better than my Trump.
I don't know. I may have a future in this. Maybe I could start doing drag shows just like Bernie Sanders or something like that.
Right? Yeah, exactly. All the like wannabe lefty talking class wannabes, they all do imitations of these people. So maybe we should just kind of up our game with our imitations.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Our impressions.
Yeah, that was kind of inspired there, right? Anything that's pissed you off this week? Anything else that's pissed you off this week? I have a couple other things I wanted to rant about, but nothing, anything else?
I actually feel like we hit on a lot of what was like annoying me this week. I don't know. I think we should kind of like go in with like the rest of what you got. I kind of like what you listed off. So to me before the show started.
Well, one thing I thought was funny because it's creepy, actually. Every time you hear Ron DeSantis and these people speak, they talk about woke, the fight against woke and the war against woke. We're not going to let woke, right? And nobody even knows what that means, right? But IPS, what's it called? The Ipsos, the hell's the name of it? I want to get the USA Today Ipsos poll, right? If someone described you as woke, would you consider it an insult or a compliment? And actually, almost half of Americans said it would be a compliment, right? Which is, really quite striking, right? And another question was thinking about what it means to be woke. Which of the following comes closest to your view? To be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. Total 56% of Americans believe that's what woke is: to be informed, educated on, and aware of social injustices. 39% is to be overtly politically correct and police others' words. Among Democrats, obviously, but even Republicans, 37% of Republicans believe that woke means you're informed, educated, and aware of social issues, to 56%. And if you look at it, then if you break it down further, independents ages 18 through 34, ages 35 to 48, and ages 65 plus. And all of those groups, a majority of people believe that woke means you're informed, educated, and aware of social injustices. So once again, the Republican Party is going around like it does on abortion rights, like it does on guns, where an overwhelming number of people support some kind of legislation on guns and on wokeness. The Republican Party is taking minority positions and taking the offensive with them. And the Washington Generals politics. I think they're going to change the Democratic symbol from a jackass to a possum, because they just lay down and in the middle of the street and pretend they're dead and they surrender, right? But they have majorities on these issues like guns, and they keep, Biden this week said on guns, my hands are, I can't do Biden. Hey, Jack, my hands are tied. I can't do anything. Hey, Jack, where do I stand? Over here, over there? I mean, I hate the whole ageist thing. I don't like, but he is kind of losing it. He is Pazzo, right?
Sorry, Sonny boy.
Sorry, Sonny boy.
We're
I don't want to hear any more of your malarkey.
We're sending those long-range missiles to Ukraine.
That's right. No more of your malarkey. Hey, Jill, bring me my soup. Hey, Joe, that's my soup. We're off the rails as bad as East Palestine, as bad as the railroads in Ohio, as bad as the trains in Ohio, right?
It's the best soup ever. It's the most amazing soup. I had way better soup when I was president. I just have to say.
I wonder how much ketchup was on the walls at Mar-a-Lago yesterday.
Yeah.
What's hilarious, like this guy wants to get cuffed and do the perp walk. He's thinking already, like, how much money can I raise off this, right?
Well, the story is that he leaked it initially, partially because he raised like $150 million in the first day or something, correct?
I kind of wonder about all those numbers. I think those numbers are BS, although there are a lot of crazy people out there who like the guy, but still, but yeah, no, there's no doubt. And
I'm in full belief that there's a cult out there. Like, I don't think DeSantis or any of the rest of them really have the sort of
no
fervor of a cult behind them the way.
Well, he has the Garland, Texas vote, right?
The North Dallas vote, yeah.
Plano and Collin County and all those places, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
It's funny though. This is really like put DeSantis in a bind, right? In that regard, it probably helps Biden, because I don't think Trump can win a general election, right?
You gotta wonder what DeSantis is going to. I'm going to ask this question mostly because I want to bring up the topic, but you got to wonder what DeSantis is going to do when that extradition order comes through. Like, I mean, is he gonna resist, or is he gonna let his new sworn enemy be carted off to jail and probably raise tens of millions of dollars out of it?
Yeah, no, he's kind of screwed. And it's kind of funny, like the Republicans have nobody, right? I mean, Nikki Haley's already kind of fizzled, and Pence is a joke, it's kind of funny. Wouldn't you think that, well, it's just
Lynn Cheney,
right?
Or I guess she might be running for a different party's nomination, but it's all over.
Why not, right? You know who among mainstream politicians I think is actually kind of impressive? The Kathy Whitmer from Michigan. They just repealed a right to work law. They have, and this is a blue state.
Gretchen.
I'm sorry, what did I say, Kathy? I'm getting all these people confused now, but Gretchen Whitmer, who's actually, she doesn't take BS. She's like, kind of stood up to them. I actually think the Democrats could do much worse than, kicking Biden out and running for president. Because the other two, the people the Democrats always talk about are Buttigieg and Kamala Harris, who I think would just get, boat raced in an election against, pretty much any of the Republicans, but
including Trump.
Yeah, and it's isn't it quite chilling that we live in this country, which is, it's still the biggest economy in the world, has this massive military establishment, and the likeliest presidents are, Biden, Trump, Buttigieg, Pence. I mean, that's scary.
DeSantis,
yeah, it's really scary. At any rate,
there's no John F. Kennedy's rising to the cream of the crop. Just kidding.
I mean, compared to these guys,
where's our Lincoln? Who's our next Lincoln?
Or as Trump said, "Where's my right cone? Where's my right cone?" It's bad. But anyway, we didn't really rant and rave as much as I thought we would, just because it's kind of depressing times. But remember, the cops aren't your friend, no matter what. They're worse than racist. They go after anybody. They go after
nor are the Democrats your friends.
Nor are the Democrats your friends. Cops will not be racist if the black people involved are athletes, or if they have some money, or if they have some resources. Don't talk to them. Cops are now protecting Proud Boys who are protesting drag shows, right? So,
or our Proud Boys attacking drag shows.
Yeah, there's no doubt, right? So, defunding police, these liberals got to get over this shit. You call it by a different name if you want, but police don't need more money. They don't need more resources. They don't need more funding. cops. You can diversify the police all you want. It's not going to matter. In Memphis, Tyree Nichols was killed by African American cops. So the head of the police union,
the Scorpion Squad.
Scorpions, good Jesus, they sound like Marvel comics, right?
I'm sure that's what they. Honestly, I do probably think they think themselves as something like that.
Well, what was the name of the group in Chicago that like terrorized people? I forget what they call themselves. These special squads. Every city has them now, like these elite units, which get these massive trains. They're the biggest snowflakes in the world too. There was a hearing last week. I don't know if you saw it. It was about guns, but of course, the Democratic representative there was in. I don't know who the guy they interviewing was, but this guy at a hearing on guns, this guy he holds up this blown up tweet that says "fuck cops" or "fuck police" or something like that.
FTP, yeah.
Well, no, this actually said "fuck." They blotted. They put asterisks, but it said "fuck cops." I don't know who the guy was, but he said, "This is a hearing on guns." I say, "No, did you say this?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, I did. They just killed somebody. I was heated." And then they went to a representative from the police, fraternal order of police or something, who talked about how traumatized he was by seeing this tweet. Right? Oh no! Like, good
hurt
Lord.
His feelings. It hurt.
How
his
many
feelings.
times has somebody said "fuck you, Scott" to you? Like
this week?
Yeah, right. Like like that's my middle name. Fuck you, Bob. Right? Just geez. I mean, if I got traumatized every somebody said that, I mean, I've had people come after me, like try to get me fired and get me like canceled and shit. And these are police. Like, he's traumatized. Geez, if he's traumatized, think about the people who were like staring down tasers and guns and all that kind of shit. So we are in dark times. The Democrats aren't your friend, and I know we're going to hear the whole vote blue no matter who. And you and I voted in 2020. We thought getting rid of Trump was imperative. You had to depose him. And I still think it was, but I'm not under any illusions that what we have going now is progress. Going back now playing this game, we'd have been all better off if like Mitt Romney had won in 2012. We'd be way ahead, I think, or if Dole had won in 96. It's really bleakness. So anyway, it's okay to be woke. It's okay to hate the cops. You shouldn't support Matt Taibbi and these other people just because they go after big tech. Big tech is not lefty's friend, but the kind of stuff Taibbi and these people are doing is nuts too. Has Taibbi ever spoken out about the way that Twitter accounts for like Code Pink and Antifa and groups like that?
I don't think so.
No, of course not. Right?
I don't believe so.
And you know what their big, I haven't followed this closely at all, but it seems to me, is their big revelation that political and tech figures are kind of in cahoots with each other? Is that kind of what they're getting at? Like
they're basically trying to say that big tech is in league with the Democrats, right? And that
they just figured that out. Who knew?
And Elon and Trump and people like that are, and however many anti-vaxxers' accounts got unfrozen when Elon took over, are the real resistance. So, and isn't that what we're getting from Aaron Mate and Matt Taibbi and those clowns?
Taibbi, Greenwald, Mate, Caitlin Johnston, he writes about foreign policy. It's bad. It's really bad. And I don't know what the hell we're gonna do. I think more people need to listen to the Green Red podcast because we do. I know we're here. More soup. And eat your soup. Right? No, I know we pimp ourselves. That's our job, right? But I mean, like legit, like look at what we do. Go to the website, go to the YouTube page, and look at the stuff we've done. I mean, lefties, nobody's done more on Cop City protests than you have.
That probably is actually not totally true, but
among our niche and our particular niche of I think that's true. I mean, but the big ones aren't doing that. They're debating Jordan Peterson and talking about like I don't know what. I mean, we deal with issues. We've talked about Ukraine, I think, as much as anybody has from a particular perspective.
No, that is true. That is true.
We've had on like Cy Hirsch, who hopefully I'll get on again sometime soon. We're going to do we haven't done a lot of history shows lately. We have another great one coming up about George Kennan, who everybody should know about. He is, I think, the new left's favorite imperialist of all time.
Mhm.
Jimmy Carter
And-
now too.
And I definitely want to do one on Eugene Debs soon. So
Talk about Gene Debs, right? And still want to do one on 1619 Project, because there's a lot of people out there I want to piss off.
Mhm.
So because that has become the holy grail now among liberals, and it's an important thing, but it's also flawed. But we're going to talk soon. We're going to do another show on the great Stoughton Lynn. There's a new book out about Stoughton Lynn's resistance against the Vietnam War. So hopefully we're going to have on the editor of that book, and Alice Lynn, which is just like Alice and Stoughton are in the uppermost level all time, really, of American activists. They are so important in the history of American resistance and American radicalism. And I think, the more you can talk to people like that, the better off all of us are. It's like we said before, thank God there wasn't social media, when these people were out there, like Howard Zinn and like Noam Chomsky and Stoughton and Alice Lind and even, Barbara Ehrenreich was kind of a little into it, but later, because if this had been a Twitter world back then, we wouldn't know
Francis Fox Piven.
we wouldn't know who these people are, right? If there had been a Twitter world back then, they actually had to like go out and do stuff, and be activists and be organizers, which today is and I think that's really one of the problems. The left really, I think, prioritizes stuff like this, which we do too, but we use it to a great deal. Like I think our biggest mission is to use this as a platform for people who aren't just sitting here. We don't just talk to each other, so. But fight the power, stop the war.
Spread the news of Scrappy Sundays. This is our own version of the Sunday talk shows.
Yeah. Not nearly as polished, but a lot more fun.
Mhm.
In those comments, in the comments on YouTube or wherever, let us know what you think. Don't forget to follow and subscribe and all that stuff. We're over 5,000 YouTube subscribers, which is good, but let's ramp that up, man. Let's double that in 2023. We still, we appreciate everything that people have given us. We have a nice little cadre of people who are supporting us, the M19 Brigade and others, comrades. But if you have a few pennies, we could always use that. We're it's just Scott and me. We don't have staff, so we're trying to kind of do some other stuff. Maybe get some bling, maybe get some hats or shirts, because a few people have asked us about that. We would love to, be able to do that, and we have some great shows planned. But if you have any ideas, let us know about that. But continue to support this. We do good stuff. We are clearly not the only people out there, but I do think we have a good niche, and we do a lot of stuff that most people don't. And we're both smart and funny. We do great Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump impressions, right? And anyway, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and hopefully we'll be back. I don't know if we'll do these every week. We'll try, but who knows? We both have day jobs, so.
So if you like what you're hearing, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to make a donation, go to greenandredpodcast.org and hit that support button, or go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/greenredpodcast. And Scrappy Sundays coming at you. And otherwise, go out and misbehave, organize, misbehave, make a lot of trouble. We'll talk to you again soon.
A chuva ainda cai, parece que as gotas me perseguem. Onde eu vou, a chuva já chegou. Olho lá fora, a chuva não foi embora. Então falo com o sol, pra que economizar seus raios, seu calor? Volte por favor, porque olho lá fora, a chuva não foi embora. Mas uma coisa eu sei, as nuvens no meu céu são passageiras, e o sol trará calor e luz pra vida inteira. a chuva ainda cai, mas deixo de lado a tristeza e dou um fim. Isso não é pra mim, love. Olho pra chuva e nada importa agora. Estou feliz e você está aqui.